Hello, and welcome to Zipf's Law English. Zipf's Law is a statistical tendency in the distribution of words in a language, and it's also the name of my blog, zipfslaw.org, where I write about oddities of the English language and the French language, and what it's like to be an English speaker living in France. The purpose of these videos is to help you learn to understand American English as it's spoken every day in classrooms, university, and at home with families, restaurants, whatever. And part of the problem with learning English is learning to understand the spoken language. So like a lot of languages, English is not typically pronounced necessarily the way that it's written. And this leads to big comprehension problems if it's not your native language. In particular, there's an issue called reduction, which refers to situations when you don't pronounce all of the sounds in the words that you're speaking. And it's something that makes English very, very difficult to understand. It makes French very, very difficult to understand. And I'm going to try to help you learn to understand the things that people say. Now, I don't recommend that you necessarily speak this way, because what sounds natural coming from me as a native speaker may sound wrong coming from you as a non-native speaker. But you have to be able to understand when people speak this way. What I'm going to talk about today is something that you'll hear very often, and it sounds like this: Lemmy. What that looks like in writing is let me. And often that's a way of asking for something like permission, in essence. People may say that before they tell you something, before they do something. I'll give you some examples. I found some examples in the American National Corpus, which is a selection of millions of words of American English. And this is from the spoken part of the corpus. So here are some example sentences. The first one is, well, let me start with Texas. So presumably this is somebody who's going to tell you about a bunch of states. They're going to start off with Texas. Now, what that normally would sound like in the spoken language is, well, let me start with Texas. So you'll notice I didn't say, well, let me start with Texas. I said, well, let me start with Texas. So let me becomes lemmy. I'll give you some other examples. Now, let me just share something. The full form, if it weren't reduced, will be, now let me just share something. But you're not going to hear that very often. More typically, it'll sound like this. Now, let me just share something. I'll give you another example. Well, let me share with you why I have the issue that I have. So this is someone who wants to explain something, and as part of introducing that, they use let me. They don't pronounce it that way. Typically, we would say, well, let me share with you why I have the issue that I have. Now, let me doesn't always get reduced in that way. And in particular, if you're talking about someone else allowing you to do something, for example, they don't let me get away with anything, you probably wouldn't do the reduction. So that'll probably sound like this: they don't let me get away with anything. Or another quote from the American National Corpus: that night they told me they let me go home and stuff from the hospital. That and stuff, that's like a way of mentioning that there were other things that you were told, but you're not being specific about what they were. It's very, very slangy. So we have this difference between they don't let me get away with anything, where you hear the let and the me separately, versus something like this: let me tell you, that was the worst pizza I've ever had. Here, you're going to have the reduction. Let me tell you, that was the worst pizza I've ever had, instead of let me tell you, that was the worst pizza I've ever had. The ya, that's you. another reduction. Here's another one. Wait, let me grab my keys. I want to get my keys. I want you to wait for me, and I want you to wait for me long enough for me to get my keys. So wait, let me grab my keys. So I'd like to talk to you now about writing this. In general, for this and any of this kind of reduction, if you have never write it in a formal situation. If you have any questions, don't do it. Don't write it to your boss. Don't write it to your professors. Don't write it in any kind of a formal communication. If you're writing to your friends, you could probably use it. If you're writing to an administrator in your university or in your human resources department, or asking for information about something you want to buy or whatever, don't do it. If you're gonna write it, it would look like this: L-E-M-M-E. So the spelling reflects the fact that the T of let me has been reduced, and it just sounds like Lemmy. L-E-M-M-E. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, if you didn't, please leave me a note in the comments. And if you'd like to read more about the bizarreness of English and French, go to zipslaw.org, my blog. Okay, bye-bye.